Greetings. My name is Robert Brandon. I am a faculty member at Colorado Tech University, and it is my pleasure to talk to you this week about what makes a great written argument. There's a quote on your screen from James Jones, a professional writer, that says, "I think the writer ought to help the reader as much as he can without damaging what he wants to say. And I don't ever think it hurts the writer to sort of stand back now and then and look at his stuff as if he were reading it instead of writing it." What Mr. Jones is talking about there is the idea that when we write for an audience. There is a consumer out there who will take it in and process that and think about that. And when we write, we are really writing for that audience. There is a school of thought that says argument is all about audience. When we can take our message and match it to the needs of the audience, we are more likely to achieve our purpose. And that's what really makes a great written argument. So as I go through this week, I'm going to cover a few things, a few tips that will help you make good arguments. But as we're moving through this, keep in mind, in the back of your mind, that really the first and foremost thing you need to have in your mind is your audience, because they are the people who need to whose needs that you need to meet. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started and look at a few things. Now, I think first of all, it's important to talk about why do arguments matter. And when we use the word argument, we really mean a process by which we prove an opinionated statement. There's something that we believe that we want other people to believe, and therefore we make an argument to convince them, to persuade them. So you could say that an argument is the act of persuasion. We sometimes, and we'll talk about this more in just a second, we sometimes get the idea that an argument is a negative thing, that it's something that two people do when they disagree and they get violent and emotional sometimes. Those are arguments, but that's not the whole total of the word as we're using it here. Those two people who are angry at each other and emotional are trying to persuade each other. They just may not be using the best possible technique to do that. What we want to talk about are ways that we can persuade others more effectively. Why does that matter to us? Why is it something that we would want to study and learn? Well, first of all, people who understand arguments and how they work are better at persuading others. That is a very important skill in our life. There are many times where we want things or need things or want to affect change over our environment. And being effective at persuading others is a good way to get what we want and what we want to see in the world. It can be things like jobs. A job interview is effectively an argument about why a person is the best possible candidate for that particular job. It could be bigger issues, social issues or political issues. Debates between political candidates are arguments. It may be that one day that you wish to be a political make political change in your city, town, or state, and or country. And when that happens, you may be making arguments to do so. So they happen in small things in our daily life, like job interviews. They happen in larger things like political arenas. They happen in our work. Proposals are often something we have to do. Many of our jobs will be funded by grants, and we have to write grant proposals to get the money that fund our organizations. Those are basically arguments about why the grant would improve the quality of your organization and your community. Meetings are oftentimes persuasive, argumentative in nature as businesses and organizations try to make the best decisions about where they're going. So if you're able to argue effectively, you'll be able to guide and nurture those organizations for which you work. Second, people who understand arguments are better consumers of information. Indeed, it has been said that literacy, informational literacy, the ability to consume information, is a key component to success in the modern era. We have information all around us. The storehouse of the world's knowledge is just a click of the button away. But there are also dangerous information out there, incorrect information out there, outdated information out there, and it falls to us to be able to consume that information effectively. When we understand arguments, when we understand persuasion, we're better able to understand the information that we're given. And then finally, people who understand arguments are better able to understand what other this says speakers, but really should say communicators are doing, because it could be written or oral communication. When we understand the techniques that make good arguments, we can recognize good and bad techniques in others, and this will help us understand what they're doing, and also, in some cases, understand how to help them. And so these are all things that this content will help you do in your life and your career. So when you think about it, I kind of touched on this just a second ago. If you look at these two conversations that are on your screen right now, you can see that these are both attempts at persuasion. And you can see on the left, someone is talking about a purchase they made. The phone is awful. It's terrible. I can't stand it. I hate it. Do yourself a favor and do not buy it. Very sort of emotional. There's no fact or information behind it. But if you look over on the right, you can see a little bit different tactic has been taken. I recently purchased a new iPhone 7. Its battery life is too short. Also, I bought it for school, but I didn't realize the Apple products would be incompatible with the programs that we were using in class. When I called customer service, I didn't receive much support. So this is also, it does have an emotional element to it, but it's not just emotion. It also takes that emotion, that the feeling that this person has of disappointment, which we as consumers of this argument are empathetic towards, but it also brings in facts behind that. It tells exactly. So on the one on the left, where it's just pure sort of rage and emotion, it doesn't say why they don't like it. But on the one on the right, we know exactly why. Short battery life, the programs don't work, and the customer service was bad. Adding that information, adding those reasons to the emotion makes a stronger argument. We also know who this person is. They've given us something about them and their own situation, that they just purchased this phone, they wanted it for school. And so that level of detail adds another layer to the argument. And so in most circumstances, for most audiences, the one on the right is going to be more effective than the one on the left. Right? And so there's a technique to getting to that. So as we're talking about how to make your arguments as effective as possible, whether those are arguments you do for a class assignment, a project, or an assignment in another class outside of an English class, or something that you do in your real life or in your workplace, the first step is to make sure you have a strong argument. And you can see down there, you see logos, ethos, pathos. We call those the three appeals. This is the theory from Aristotle that says there are three ways to convince each other, three ways to persuade. And the best arguers, the best persuaders will use all three. Now, they may weigh on one more than differently given the audience, because remember, it goes back to the audience, and some audiences will be more receptive to one appeal or the other, but a good argument, to make sure it's strong, will include all three. So the first is that logical appeal, right? That's the reasons. Have you thought through it? Going back to our example, the logical appeal is the battery is too short. It won't run the programs at my school, and customer service is poor. Those are the reasons. That's the logical appeal. And so it's on that foundation, the audience, that the argument rests. So when you're going through there, you want to think through, again, what appeals, what reasons are going to be best for your audience. Are you writing for a professional audience? Are you writing for an audience who are experts in it? Well, then your reasons will need to be more advanced. Are you writing for a beginning audience? School children who have no context? Well, in those courses, your your reasons would need to be, more simple. But regardless, the reasons that you're giving, that's your logical appeal. And so it's the first part of a good argument. So as you look at this, another example here, this kind of gets at what we were just saying with the audience and having to take their own viewpoints, their own biases into account, what they know. You can see we're watching football on Sunday, and George is talking to the son, watching the game. The son has never watched football before, doesn't know about it. But as the game's going on, you can see there's questions coming up. Why are they hurting each other? Why can't I play like that? What do you do? Why do you like that team if they get you so upset? So these are very simple questions. And so as George is answering them, he wants to make sure he meets his son's needs, but he'll probably answer those in a different way than he would if he were answering similar questions coming from another football fan. And it would be a different way again than if he was making those answering those questions for a professional coach, having that kind of discussion with a professional coach someplace. So the audience would change, the reasons would change, the logic would change as your audience changes. The second part of a good argument is the ethical appeal. And this is one that people sometimes get sideways in their head, because the word ethical, when we translate ethos over into English, and it's the ethical appeal, to us, ethical appeal, the word ethics normally means something about morality. It's probably better to think of it in this context as being reputation. You're appealing to reputation. On one hand, the most obvious place is your reputation as the writer. What is your context? Why should the audience trust you? And there's some ways that we do that. One is with formatting. We think sometimes, oh, why do I need to type my papers, or why do I need to type my arguments? Why do I need the double space? What's the point of including title pages and headings and things like that? Well, part of it is this idea of the ethical appeal, your reputation. Your audience has certain expectations, and so when you meet those expectations, they're more likely to trust you. And that would, again, depend on the audience. A professional audience has different expectations for that kind of thing than, say, a group of elementary school kids. If you were talking to elementary school kids, you might bring in a poster board that had lots of pictures and art on it and put it up to produce a document for them. But talking to a professional or an academic audience, you're probably writing it down. And that's where the spacing and the formatting comes in. Your language being correct, people will trust that. The fact that they can tell, one thing that makes people gets people on edge is can they see you're biased? Can they see that you come into it with maybe a chip on your shoulder about whatever it is you're arguing about? So we want to kind of look objective. We want to seem like we're taking the middle ground. Even if we're not, that appearance of objectiveness helps the reader trust you. Being good with our language and professional with our language helps the reader trust you. This is the ethical appeal. Research is part of the ethical appeal, especially for professional audience. I kind of phrase it like this. If I tell you something, if I'm making an argument and I say, this is what I believe, you might believe that. But if I then go and say, well, here is an expert in the field, now you're more likely to believe it. And if I then said, and here is another expert in the field, now you're more likely to believe it. And so your research and your sources is a way to build the ethical appeal. So the ethical appeal is not just your reputation, it's your reputation alongside the sources that you're using. And that's why research is so important. It adds to your ethical appeal. It's essentially, if you think of it in this analogy, if you are in an argument with a friend and you're debating each other, and then all of a sudden another one of your friends, the one who knows the most about the subject, comes over and joins your side, That's very helpful in an argument. And that's what research does for you. You bring in the best research, people will trust you more. And that's why your research has to be, good. You have to go to places that the audience is going to trust the research. And so when we talk about credibility of sources, we're really saying, will your audience trust this source? All right. And so that's the ethical appeal. So we've got our reasons, our clear outlined reasons for the logical appeal. We've built our reputation and back that up with the reputation of another person for our ethical appeal. And then we bring in the emotional appeal. Does your audience understand why this matters? The best example I can think of the emotional appeal is if you've ever been driving down the interstate and you've looked up and perhaps you've seen, a picture of a young person full of life, or maybe a cute young child there. And of course, your eyes draw up there to see this. And then next to it, it'll say maybe, killed by a drunk driver or something like that. And that's an emotional appeal. Whoever put that billboard up is showing you why this is important. This issue affected these people, and they're choosing people who will pull your heartstrings more. There were always those commercials on television about sending the donations to the Animal Rescue Network. And of course, what did they have? Well, they had the very cute animals there for you to see. You could actually see what that was affecting. And if you're an animal lover, you would see the cute animals, and that would affect you emotionally to bring you to their side. And so as you're thinking about making your audience strong, you need that. You need to show your audience what's at stake. This can be done with, again, with research, but it can also be done with narrative and story and examples. Sometimes those examples are the best source of this emotional appeal. If we go back to our example of the poor battery life, well, if the person who wrote that had then come in behind with a story about how they had worked all night, they had a project to do, they had sat down to do it, they had got halfway finished, and their computer had crashed because of that poor battery life. Well, that's something we can all relate to, and we can all think we've all been there in some, if you're in a university, you've been there where you've been in a deadline and the technology hasn't worked. We can connect to that. We can see what's at stake, and that emotional connection is what you're looking for. And so that is indeed why you bring in the emotional appeal. And so when we talk about strong arguments, they have the logical appeal, they have the emotional appeal, and they have the appeal to reputation. So think about that as you're creating your own arguments. Can I get all three of those things into my argument? You're going to be stronger if you can. All right, there's another way to say that. That was sort of the theoretical. If we bring that over to the practical, there's another way to say that. And it's basically, tell me what you know. That's the logical appeal. Show me why you know it's true. That's the appeal to reputation. And explain why it matters. That's the emotional appeal. If you can do those three things, your argument is probably pretty strong. Now, once you've built the argument, once you know what your logical appeal, your emotional appeal, and your appeal to reputation are, then it's time to structure that argument. All right. It's time to put it together. Look at these leaves on the screen right now. They could be in any order, right? We could pick any order, put them in. But the way the artist has arranged these, they've put the colors together in a sort of a transitional pattern. That pattern is pleasing. Human beings like things with pattern. We like symmetry. Most of us, we like symmetry. We like things with certain patterns. And writing is just like that. There is an art to putting arguments together in a pleasing way. And again, meeting that audience's need. So what should this basic structure of an argument look like? Well, you basically have 4 points to an argument, right? You've got your topic, then you've got the argument itself. That would be like your thesis. That'd be what you're trying to prove. Then you've got your reasons, and you've got the evidence for that reasons. And when you put that together, That's where your argument is going to come from. So if you think about, you can see the example here. If we have a topic that's rock climbing, right? That's not an argumentative topic in and of itself, because that's not an opinion. That's not, it's just a topic. So when you're getting ready to put your argument together, you've got to move past that. All right. And so you can see that the issue that we've decided here is, and the argument that comes with it is, rock climbing isn't just a sport for super athletes. It's a way for everyone in your family to stay fit. So here's the argument. It's for everyone. And that might be, that's an opinion. That might be controversial. There may be people who say, well, I don't want my 8-year-old climbing a rock. Okay. And so now the argument comes, can I convince that person that rock climbing is in the best interest of the whole family? Now you've got an argument. So you went from topic over to argument in that way. And then you start generating your reasons. And this is where I always tell students to start. Start by thinking of your reasons. If you're going to say the Honda Civic is the best car for commuters, you've got to have reasons. It's inexpensive and it has great safety features. Those are reasons. This rock climbing one, it's safe. It exercises the whole body. It teaches teamwork, focus, and discipline. Those are reasons. So as you're working through the thought process of starting your argument, this is the process. What's my topic? What's my opinion about the topic? What are the reasons my opinion is true? Now, if you can do those things, you'll have the basics to structure for your argument. Then it'll just be putting meat on the bones around that. But once you lay that out, you have the basic format that you're looking for. Now, if you look at the one on your screen there, rock climbing is amazing. I loved it from the first moment I tried it. If you don't like it or aren't willing to give it out, you're missing out big time. Everyone is giving it a try and they love it too. I mean, if you don't like it, you're just weird or lazy. There's a lot of things wrong here. But one of the big things when we talk about structure is it just moves from point to point to point, right? It's not, when we go back to the first part, when we talk about logical, emotional, and reputation, it's missing a lot of those too. There are no reasons, so there's no logical appeal. When we talk about reputation, we damage our reputation when we call other people names. People don't like that. That makes us look bad. So we can see that in there as well. So it's missing some of the parts, but even the parts that are there are not ordered in a logical way, in a appealing way. So if we use structure instead to make the place, you can see how this breaks out. Now, if we go down to the reasons, we can see the first reason is rock climbing is a great workout for both your mind and your body, right? So there's a reason. Once you give a reason, now you've got to give evidence. And you can see they've brought in 2 pieces of evidence. Exercise is about engaging your muscles, and studies have linked those movements to helping with motor control and keeping some conditions away. So now we've got reason and we've got evidence, right? And so that's starting to put the bones on the argument. So if you look at how we set it up, when we take all the parts that we just talked about, we've got an introductory paragraph we have to have. That's where the issue turns into the argument. Then we're going to have any number of body paragraphs. Depends on how long a thing we want to write. It might be 3, it might be 1. It might be 100. If we're writing a book, it's going to be a whole lot more body paragraphs. So we have enough body paragraphs to cover all the reasons and evidence we want. So that's what goes in the body paragraphs. And in the conclusion, we sum it up. And then we add a reference page then, again, to build our reputation so that people know that we are trustworthy because we're using these high quality sources to back ourselves up. So we put that in the reference page. So if we look at each piece as you start to move to organizing and getting the writing started, here's what the introduction is going to look like. I always say there's 3 parts to the introduction. You've got a hook to engage your audience. People often use questions for a hook, something to get the reader thinking. They'll often use a story, So again, if they're writing about the best car for a commute, trying to convince somebody of that, well, then they may think of telling a story about a time, about someone trapped in an hour-long commute. If they're writing about rock climbing, they may tell the story of reaching the top of the peak and looking around and how their body and their mind felt at the end of it. Those things engage the audience, get us involved into what you're doing. And so you want to do that. Once you've got the audience's attention, once you've got them connected, once you've got them hooked, now it's time to present your topic. And that's where you'll just transition over to say, hey, rock climbing is great. Here's my story about rock climbing and reaching the peak. It's great. Love it. It's a great activity. But there are some people who feel like it's dangerous. And then you make your topic. However, they need to understand blah, 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 and you give the argument that you've got. That's your introductory paragraph. So you give your hook, you set the topic, and then you establish your argument, or what some people call thesis, if you're more comfortable with that language. Once you've done that, well, let's talk about that argument line first. That's a really important line. It really is normally should be the last sentence of the introduction. What should it do? It should be one sentence and it should be direct. This is not a place to qualify or compromise. People need to know exactly what you think. Some people like to hide their point until the end, kind of like a mystery novel. They want to lead up to it and then kind of unveil what they think at the end. No. You want in an argument, you want to say it up front because your audience will follow you better if they know what you're trying to prove. So that sentence needs to be direct and clear and say, this is exactly what I believe about that topic. Then, well, here's some examples for you. And again, why wouldn't you want to try rock climbing? Well, that's a question. It's asking the audience. They may not answer the way that you want to. I love climbing. That's better, all right? But it doesn't give the why. In this paper, I will discuss rock climbing. Well, you're already writing the paper. Go ahead and say what you believe. And so over there, you can see rock climbing is one of the best workouts you can do, and it's more accessible than you might think. Now you have an argument that the audience can kind of sink their teeth into. You've said exactly what you're going to prove and exactly what they need to know. Okay, so the next part, after you've got the introduction, hook, topic, argument. Now it's time for your body paragraphs. They probably, they're going to have a couple parts. They're also going to have a couple of parts. They're going to have a topic sentence that says this paragraph is about whatever, safety, health benefits, whatever. That first sentence is going to be the topic sentence. That helps your reader know what you're about to do. And then there probably about 3 to 6, maybe 8 sentences where you come in and you give your reasons and your evidence. So if you've said rock climbing is good exercise, your next sentence needs to be a reason rock climbing is good exercise. And then after you give your reason, you need evidence that shows your reason is true. If you follow that pattern, your body paragraphs will be strong. So again, think of it as topic sentence, which says what the paragraph's about, a sentence that has a reason that the topic sentence is true, evidence that shows your reason is true, and then you close by kind of explaining the why, that emotional part, the why this is important to the audience. Let's look and see how that works. So here's a topic sentence. We work out to strengthen our muscles, burn fat, and improve our fitness. That is the topic sentence. In this paragraph, I'm going to talk about how exercise strengthens our muscles, burns fats, and improves our fitness. Then they come with the reason. You can see they've pulled that from a source. According to a recent article, rock climbing does just that. There's the reason, right? So topic sentence, exercise is good. Reason number 1, rock climbing is exercise. Then you've got the evidence from Hyde, this expert in the field that explains what the exercise does. And then if you get down to the bottom, you see that last part, that explanation, because the motions that make climbing are natural and the gear makes climbing safe, anyone can grab shoes and harness, rope up, and get started. So that's connecting it back to the audience. So it follows that pattern perfectly, right? Once you get in that pattern, it works. Topic sentence, reason, evidence, explanation. Just kind of keep that in mind, jot those 4 points down so that when you write yours, you'll have the points and you can just kind of get in that framework. It becomes sort of a pattern that you can follow to make these effective arguments. Again, I'll say it one more time. Topic sentence, reason, evidence, analysis or explanation. All right, and then that brings us to the conclusion. What makes a good concluding paragraph? I always say, I'll add one more thing to this. We've got 2 on the screen. We'll say 3. The first thing you probably want to do is restate your argument. Remind your audience what you're talking about. Then, once you do that, summarize your major points. I always say to think about this as being, if somebody is on the street and says, hey, I heard you were writing about an argument about rock climbing, tell me about it. The 2 or 3 sentences that you would share there, that would be your summary, the 2 or 3 sentence overview of your paper. And then finally, tell your audience what you want them to do now. We call that the call to action. Essays, arguments are action oriented. We want to affect change. We're convincing someone to do something. So what should they do now their paper's over? Should they change their behavior? Should they go do something? That call to action should end it. So again, the 3 parts for concluding paragraph: restate your thesis, summarize your major points, and provide your call to action. All right. If you can do those things, either in spoken or written format, you'll be able to make effective arguments, and that will make you, as we said when we started, a more effective communicator who's better able to consume information and understand what other speakers are doing. Thank you for your time. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to your instructors. They are there to help you make the best arguments you can. Thank you very much.